war started, they had to reinvent themselves. They were all part of the working class, and I tended my artistic practice to extend the field. So I think it's not just exploring each other, but it's also the space where questions like representation, who can be in control of his representation or her representation, and what does it mean participatory cultures. So in a way, how to find a topos, a field where an egalitarian approach towards movements, production within the condition of the fine art field and culture in general can happen. So, sounds maybe a bit complicated. If anybody of you can really interrupt me if I shall elaborate something or explain it better. Or with other words, English is not my mother tongue, and it's not, not just easy to explain all the different aspects which inscribed when you work on the borders of class society. So, now I've said it, class society. Yeah. So, because I perceive the Yugoslavians and migrants in general in Austria as part of a different class. We're not part of the ruling class, we're not represented, but okay, and maybe you are also not represented by Angela Merkel and who else. And objects are always also a kind of representation of somebody, of something which is not here. So therefore, I made the link to representation. For me, the field of representation is not a clear field which is just now, okay, but it's always the representation of something which is not here. Yeah, and this, yeah.
I would just like to hint to the discussion we had last week on the archive, the idea of the archive, because what also comes into the archive are also most of it representations of something. So this question of control and representation is just to remind you very much linked to archive as well, because the archive is controlling
exactly, yeah.
Apparatus and so just an
Yeah.
aside, a footnote here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my interest is like to see it, and then we found in our collective with Michi, because I always think when you do something, you try not to end up in a ghetto, you know? Like the hint would be, don't just stay at Liva House with your archive, you know? Go out and interact with the public, but you don't need necessarily to understand it as this kind of just strict dislocation of the object, yeah? It can be also something else. It can be like, I don't know, to take this watch and put it somewhere in a central place, yeah? Or I say this kind of signs on the central place, like kind of 600 kilometers is Burgenland, and Prague is, I don't know, 200 kilometers away from here. Maybe you can write, I don't know, contemporary Africa is just 50 meters or something like that, you know? I mean, that is how kind of artists can operate and how they can kind of relate to, whatever. So, for me this is way too sublime and subtle. I'm more for the rough, you know, for the kind of, let's better kick some ass if, prefer to kick some ass, to break some glasses than to scratch on the surface. So, but it's not, I don't want to say that this is the better approach. I'm just maybe more talented for breaking glass than to inscribe a beautiful tag, whatever. So, when we started to work, it was clear that we deal with the leftovers of the Yugoslavian population, which was part of an economical deal. So these people have been sold to Austria and also to Germany, but I'm just talking about the Austrian situation, as part of a deal. Like the first working class, which was sold by a socialist government to a capitalist world, then this socialist country disappeared, disintegrated, and the interesting thing in Austria is that in Vienna you had 120 workers' clubs, which were kind of extension of the Yugoslavian space, where the motto was brotherhood and unity, and suddenly people thought that the language they speak is Yugoslavian, a language which doesn't exist, and that the ethnic and religious background of the people was non-important, you know? So in a way the fascinating thing is that in Yugoslavia the post-national subversion on the Yugoslavian crowd was stronger than in Yugoslavia itself. So it was more difficult to be a Serb in Vienna or to become a Serb, to be produced as a kind of a person with the ethnic, clear ethnic identity than in Yugoslavia. Yeah, so that people still cooperated, worked together, but we didn't have this kind of clubs anymore, so they reinvented themselves as business enterprises, and these business enterprises operated mainly in the form of a bar, and next to the bar a kind of a store with workshops, secretary, and the workers were in the same moment also the guests of the bar, and sometimes we were paid in the bars. So that means that was kind of like an autonomous system where you receive money for your work and then you give it back for drinks. So kind of a parallel society in a strange way, where the kind of post-national ties still somehow functioned, and people had to cooperate in order to execute bigger requests. So when we came in, we kept the bar as it is. We hired waitresses who speak German, Serb, Croatian, all the languages needed for running such a place, but the space behind it we changed into a kind of prosumerist gallery space, and started working with them. Invited them to participate in our artistic practice, and by this artistic practice we are generating an archive, few documentation. That archive is kind of, I don't know how many hours of videos, interviews, where people talk about their role in the war, what they did. Then, as example, one waitress says, relating to kind of where she comes from, even when I die, I want to be buried here. So now we take this archive and we have a Dart engine where I can play darts, and we are hacking like that machine, the Dart engine, that in a way, when you hit it, you don't hear the sound doo-doo-doo, like doo-doo, or I don't know, the sound the bull's eye make, you know, but you can hear a sentence from the archive randomly, like you hit it and you hear, when I die, I want to be buried here, or you hear kind of, I don't know, a presentation for someone else. So it's also a way how to make this archive readable, the archive accessible, you know. In our domain, working with Yugoslavian, it is a kind of important thing to emphasis on the oral history, because I think you won't know it, but kind of Yugoslavian is kind of an oral history country. You know, it's kind of the songs are extremely important. The language of cooperation is extremely important. So there are people who have been kind of under the Ottoman Empire, they have been under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they have been occupied by the Germans. So there is a condition that the own languages have often been not written but spoken. So even kind of this all sound files we have is extremely important, and this kind of culture, yeah, to be brought to the next generation in another way, also has its kind of impacts on popular culture. Yeah? When, as an example, John F. Kennedy was killed, I think it was 63? No. Yeah. Yeah. There appears a single in Yugoslavia, a kind of a tribal folk punk style about the latest developments in Dallas, the shooting and killing of JFK. You know, like, and this is also how information can be distributed. Just to give you an example, and I think that's also maybe why we work together, because I think the complexity of such a society and the complexity, there are some similarities, you know, I don't want to eagleize them to say it's the same stuff, you know, it's the same story, but it's kind of, there's certain things which always I'm remembered when I deal with kind of working in Nairobi. What does it mean? Who are the subject? Who can kind of participate in contemporary culture? Who is excluded? Who is included in kind of forming the archive? Who is excluded from it? Who can and who can access it? Yeah? So I think that accessibility is also a very important issue in kind of the Meshing Up archive, because it broadens the possible audience, the possible participants. And yeah, consuming.
I think someone wants to interrupt.
I have a question
Yes.
for the second room, as you call it, behind the bar.
Yeah,
You said you're still running the bar as it was before.
we
So the
yeah.
waitress they have different nationalities or
Yeah.
and speak different languages, and the guests.
as well. When we took over the bar, it was kind of a Serbian nationalist place. You know, every bar in Vienna, there are, according to the economical chamber, there's 600 bars and restaurants in Vienna with that kind of Migrationshintergrund, what it's called. So with the ex-Yugoslavian Migrationshintergrund. It's like a shadow of migration. Yeah? And this is mainly, most of these bars are kind of have the same system of function, like this business model, to being a construction enterprise, and the bar is the mensa. So that are the legal terms. And the funny thing is that not only that are just kind of Serbians working in the Serbian bar, but there are also kind of Czech or Slovak people who learned rather to speak Serbo-Croatian than to speak German. Yeah? So there's this kind of strange level of layer of acceptance. Yeah? So this kind of division based on ethnical and national layers is fading. Yeah? There are still signs there, but in general,